I guess I should start at the beginning. My name is David, but for context, I'm 34, and I've been married to my wife, Claire, for 8 years. We met in our mid-20s, fell in love fast, and everything seemed perfect. She was smart, charming, and had this confidence about her that drew people in. I thought I had hit the jackpot. She was my best friend, my partner in everything. We traveled together, planned our future together. We had a house, 2 cars, stable jobs. We were that couple, the one everyone thought had it all figured out, but over the past few months, something changed. It was small at first. Little things that, on their own, wouldn't have seemed like much. She started going to bed later than me. She was always on her phone, smiling at messages she would never let me see. She used to be the type to show me funny things she found online, random memes, texts from her friends. But then, her phone became glued to her hand, always tilted away from me. I'd catch her swiping away notifications the moment I walked into the room. She also started dressing differently. Claire had always been stylish, but she suddenly became obsessed with looking perfect all the time. New clothes, new perfume, going to the gym every day after work, even though she had never been a gym person before. At first, I thought she was just trying to feel good about herself. But then, I noticed something else. She never seemed interested in looking nice for me. I would compliment her, tell her she looked great, and she would just shrug it off, barely responding. It felt like she was getting dressed up for someone else. Then came the work trips. Claire had a stable job at an accounting firm, and her position didn't really require her to travel. But out of nowhere, she started mentioning team-building events and company retreats. She would leave for weekends at a time, always coming back with vague stories that never really added up. That I tried to ignore it. I tried to convince myself that I was being paranoid. I told myself that I was just overthinking things because work had been stressful for me. But no matter how much I tried to brush it off, the feeling wouldn't go away. Then, the late nights at the office started. Claire used to come home at the same time every day, like clockwork. But suddenly, she was staying late. Meetings that ran overtime, last-minute projects, important deadlines. She always had a reason. But when I asked about them, she would get defensive. She started snapping at me over nothing. If I asked when she would be home, she would sigh like I was suffocating her. If I asked if everything was okay, she would roll her eyes and tell me I was acting weird. The woman who used to be excited to tell me about her day now barely talked to me at all, and the worst part, I felt like a stranger in my own home. She was right there in front of me, but she wasn't with me anymore. She was somewhere else. Thinking about something else. Or, as I was starting to suspect, someone else that I wasn't the jealous type. I had never been. I trusted Claire. At least, I used to. But there was something in my gut that told me I needed to start paying attention. Because whatever was happening, it wasn't nothing, and deep down, I already knew the truth that I just wasn't ready to admit it yet. The feeling of something being wrong never left me. It followed me everywhere, into the quiet moments of my morning routine, through the long hours at work, and especially in the evenings when I was home alone, wondering where Claire really was. It wasn't just suspicion anymore. It was a certainty I didn't want to accept, but the signs were there, stacking up like bricks in a wall I couldn't ignore. She had started coming home late more often. The excuses were endless work meetings, urgent projects, a coworker needing help with something. The explanations were just detailed enough to sound believable, but they never quite made sense when I thought about them later. Her job had never been that demanding before. Why now? Then, there was the way she acted around me. The distance between us wasn't just emotional anymore, it was physical. She barely touched me, barely looked at me the way she used to. When I reached for her, she pulled away in subtle ways that felt like daggers. She stopped initiating anything between us. I could feel her shutting down, retreating into something I wasn't a part of. It wasn't just stress. It wasn't just a bad mood. It was something deeper, something that had changed the way she saw me. the first real red flag came when I noticed a change in her phone habits. She had always been open with it before, leaving it on the table, letting it charge in the living room while we watched TV. But now, it was always with her. She never left it unattended, not even for a second. She took it with her to the bathroom, to the shower, even when she was just stepping into another room for a minute. She had a password on it before, but now, I noticed she changed it frequently. I started paying attention to her notifications. I never tried to snoop, never tried to go through her messages. But I didn't have to. The way she reacted to her phone was enough. If I walked into the room while she was on it, she would tilt the screen away, swipe messages off the screen before I could see them. When it buzzed, she would glance at it quickly and then flip it face down like she didn't want me to ask who was texting her, and then there was the biggest shift, the one that made my stomach twist every time I thought about it. She wasn't just hiding something. She was happier, not with me. Not in our marriage. But there was something about her, something in the way she moved, in the way she carried herself. She had a lightness in her step, an energy that hadn't been there before. She was distracted, constantly checking her phone, constantly lost in thought, but it wasn't the kind of distraction that came from stress. It was the kind that came from excitement. She was glowing, but not because of me. I started piecing things together, looking back on all the small, subtle changes. The extra effort in how she dressed. The perfume. The gym. The way she would smile at something on her phone, only to erase it from her face the second she realized I was watching. I replayed conversations in my head, looking for gaps, for inconsistencies, for things that hadn't made sense at the time but were painfully obvious now, and the worst part, it all pointed to someone else, someone who had made her feel something that I apparently couldn't anymore. I didn't want to believe it. I didn't want to be the husband who checked his wife's phone, who tracked her location, who became the paranoid, jealous man who let suspicion eat him alive. I didn't want to be that guy. But at the same time, I couldn't keep living in denial. I needed to know, and that was how I finally found the proof. One night, she had been careless. She was in the shower, and she left her laptop open on the kitchen counter. Claire never did that. She was obsessive about logging out, closing tabs, making sure nothing was left open. But this time, she hadn't. Maybe she was distracted, or maybe she just never expected me to check. Either way, I did, and that was when I saw an email account I didn't recognize. Logged in, sitting right there in front of me. It wasn't her usual work email or her personal one. It was something new, something separate. And the messages inside told me everything I needed to know. They weren't just messages. They were love letters. Intimate, emotional, raw. Pages and pages of words exchanged between Claire and someone else. Someone who made her laugh, who made her feel things she no longer felt for me. Someone who she was meeting in secret. I scrolled through the messages, my hands shaking. I didn't even have to read much to know exactly what was happening. The way she spoke to him, the way she described their time together, the way she told him she missed him, there was no doubt. She wasn't just cheating. She was in love with him, and the worst part? The absolute gut punch, I recognized his name, because he wasn't just some stranger. He was someone I worked with. I sat there, staring at the screen, feeling my entire world collapse around me, everything I had built. Everything I had trusted. The woman I had promised to spend my life with, and the person she had chosen to betray me with, was someone who sat 3 desks away from me every single day, someone who shook my hand, who laughed at my jokes, who talked about weekend plans with me as if he wasn't already spending his weekends with my wife. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. I had been wrong about so many things, but the one thing I was sure of now. This was just the beginning. I sat there staring at the laptop screen, my entire body frozen, as if moving would somehow make it all more real. The words on the screen blurred together, but I didn't need to reread them. I had already seen more than enough. I had already lost more than enough. Claire wasn't just cheating. She was in love with him. The emails weren't just lust, weren't just impulsive flings that could be written off as momentary mistakes. They were filled with details, emotions, things that cut deeper than I ever expected. She told him how she missed him when they were apart. She described the rush she felt when she was with him, the way he made her feel alive in a way that, apparently, I never did. She joked about how she had to keep things a secret, how she played the role of the loving wife when she came home to me, while all she could think about was him, and the worst part. It had been going on for months, not weeks. Not days. Months that I traced the emails back, searching for the first one. The start of it all. 6 months ago. That was how long I had been living a lie. While I was coming home from work, exhausted but happy to see her, she was sneaking around, lying to my face, sharing intimate moments with someone else, and not just someone else, someone I knew. Someone I trusted. That I felt sick, the man she had been cheating with, the man who had taken my wife from me while smiling in my face at work, was Jason. One of my colleagues. Someone I worked with almost every day. I had spent years in meetings with him, cracking jokes, talking about life, never once thinking that he was the one destroying mine. Looking back, the signs were there. Jason had always been friendly with Claire, but I never thought much of it. He was social, easygoing, the type of guy who got along with everyone. He had met Claire at a company event years ago, but I never imagined anything had come from it. They never gave me a reason to be suspicious. Or maybe I had just been blind. That I sat there, my hands gripping the edge of the table so tightly I thought I might break it. The anger was there, boiling under the surface, but it was drowned out by something heavier. Something worse. A deep, hollow emptiness. This wasn't just a betrayal. It was a full-blown, carefully orchestrated deception. Claire had built an entirely separate life behind my back. She had crafted a story where I was nothing more than a placeholder, a convenience she could return to after she was done with him. She had been in my home, in my bed, while thinking about another man. And Jason? He had been standing next to me at work, shaking my hand, nodding along as I talked about weekend plans, all while knowing that he would be spending time with my wife behind my back. It wasn't just the cheating. It was the audacity. I closed the laptop and sat in silence, my mind spinning. What was I supposed to do now? Confront her? I wasn't ready for that. Not yet. The rage inside me was too raw, too unstable. If I said something now, I didn't trust myself to stay calm. Confront Jason? That thought alone made my blood pressure spike. I imagined walking into the office, standing in front of his desk, watching the smug look on his face shift into something else, something terrified. He had gotten away with this for too long. He had sat there, day after day, pretending like nothing was happening, probably laughing behind my back. But what would I do? Scream at him in front of the entire office? Punch him in the face and get fired? Would that even make me feel better, or would it just make me look like the fool he had already decided I was? I had no answers. No plan. No idea how to move forward. The only thing I knew for sure was that my marriage was already dead. There was no fixing this. No coming back from it. Claire had made her choice long ago. I just had to decide what I was going to do about it, and I wasn't going to rush that decision. If she had spent months lying to me, the least I could do was take my time figuring out how to make her regret it. I didn't sleep that night. I couldn't. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, while Claire slept beside me like nothing had changed. Like she wasn't living a double life. Like she hadn't been sending love letters to another man just hours earlier. Every breath she took felt like a slap in the face. Every peaceful sigh, every slight movement under the covers, it all felt like proof of just how little this was affecting her. But for me? Everything was different now. I kept replaying the emails in my head, over and over again, every word digging deeper into my skull like a knife. She had written about me. About us. About how she had to pretend to still love me, how she had to play the part of the devoted wife while she counted down the minutes until she could see Jason again. She had laughed about it with him. Made jokes about how clueless I was, how easy it was to keep me in the dark. I turned my head slightly and looked at her, asleep in the dim light of our bedroom. My wife. My partner. The woman I had trusted with everything. I felt sick. I wanted to shake her awake and demand answers. I wanted to ask her how she could do this to me, how she could look me in the eyes every single day and still lie so effortlessly, but I didn't, not yet. That I needed more. That I didn't just want to confront her, I wanted to destroy her carefully crafted lie. I wanted to make sure she had no way out, no excuse to twist things in her favor, no possible way to gaslight me into doubting what I knew was real. So I waited. The next morning, I got up before Claire. I went through the motions like nothing was wrong. Brushed my teeth. Got dressed for work. Made coffee. She came downstairs a little later, yawning, stretching like she hadn't just been betraying me for half a year. She smiled at me, that same smile I had fallen in love with all those years ago. But now, it felt fake. Manufactured. She kissed my cheek and told me she had another late night at work. Another meeting. Another excuse. That I nodded, forcing my face into something neutral. I didn't react. Didn't push. Just let her believe that I was still in the dark, because she was going to be in for a rude awakening soon. That I went to work like usual, but I couldn't focus. Jason was there, as expected, sitting at his desk, typing away like he wasn't a complete fraud. I watched him out of the corner of my eye, studying him in a way I never had before. Had he been nervous around me? Had he ever slipped up? No. He was too comfortable. Too sure that I would never figure it out. He wasn't avoiding me. He wasn't acting differently. He was laughing with coworkers, drinking his coffee, making jokes. That he had gotten too good at this. That I clenched my jaw, forcing myself to stay in control. I wanted to walk over to his desk and slam his head into it. I wanted to grab him by the collar and demand to know how long he had been sleeping with my wife. I wanted to ruin him the way he had ruined my marriage, but I didn't, because I wasn't done gathering evidence yet. That I already had the emails, but I needed more. I needed undeniable proof that would leave Claire with nowhere to run. That would make her admit to everything without the chance to spin the story into something else. So I did something I never thought I would do. That I followed her, that night, when she left for her late meeting. I gave her a 10-minute head start before I got in my car and drove after her. My heart was pounding so hard I could barely think straight, but I kept my hand steady on the wheel. She didn't go to work. That I watched as she drove across town, past the office, past the restaurants, past anywhere that made sense for someone who was supposedly stuck at work late, and then she pulled into a hotel parking lot. That I felt my breath leave my body. She parked near the back, in a space that was partially hidden from the main road. And then, as if this wasn't already bad enough, a second car pulled up next to hers. Jason. It was him. I gripped the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. I watched as she got out of the car, glancing around like she was checking to make sure she hadn't been followed. She wasn't even nervous. She had done this before. Jason stepped out of his car, and they greeted each other like this was just another normal day. No hesitation. No guilt. No shame. And then they walked into the hotel together. I couldn't move. Couldn't breathe. The reality of it hit me so hard I thought I might pass out. Seeing the emails had been one thing. But this? Seeing it with my own eyes, it was worse. So much worse, because now, there was no doubt. No excuse she could give me later. No lie she could use to twist things around. Claire was cheating on me. Right now. In real time. And I was sitting in my car, watching it happen. I had never felt rage like this before. It was consuming, overwhelming, a force so strong I thought it might kill me. But I didn't move. Didn't storm into the hotel. Didn't make a scene, not yet, because now, I had them exactly where I wanted them, and I wasn't going to confront them until I was ready to burn it all down. I sat in my car, gripping the wheel so hard my fingers started to go numb. Claire and Jason had disappeared into the hotel, no hesitation, no second guessing, like this was routine for them. Like this wasn't the first time. Like it wasn't a big deal at all. It was one thing to read the messages, to see the proof in emails, to piece together the puzzle in my head. But watching it happen in real time? That was different. That was visceral. I wasn't the jealous type. I had never been insecure in our marriage. I wasn't the kind of guy who snooped through my wife's phone or questioned where she was every second of the day. I had trusted Claire. Trusted her more than anyone. But that trust had been turned into a joke. I had been turned into a joke, and the worst part. They were still in there. Still together. That I checked my watch. They had been inside for 10 minutes. 10 minutes was all it took for my entire world to shift. That I forced myself to take a breath. I couldn't storm in there, not yet. Not because I didn't want to, but because I knew that if I did, I wouldn't be able to control myself. And right now, I needed control more than I needed revenge. So I waited. I sat in that parking lot, staring at the entrance, feeling every single emotion crash over me like a tidal wave. Rage. Betrayal. Disgust, and underneath it all, the one thing I hated most, sadness. That I had loved Claire. I had built a life with her, given her everything I had. And she had thrown it away. She had chosen this instead. Chosen sneaking around like some teenager, lying to my face, humiliating me behind my back. That I wanted to confront them. I wanted to end this right here, right now. But I needed a plan. That I needed proof that couldn't be explained away. That I reached for my phone and snapped a picture of their cars parked next to each other in the lot. Then, I got out of my car and walked toward the hotel. Not inside, just close enough to see the front desk, to get a clear picture of what I was dealing with. I wasn't the only one who had seen them. The receptionist, a bored-looking woman scrolling on her phone, had barely looked up when they walked in. But she had definitely seen them. People had seen them. They weren't exactly being subtle. That I waited another 10 minutes. Then 20.30. That I felt like I was suffocating. My whole body was tense, my jaw locked so tight it ached. I had never felt this kind of anger before, the kind that sat under the surface, bubbling, waiting to explode. And then, after almost an hour, the doors opened. Claire stepped out first. She looked different. Relaxed. Carefree. Jason was right behind her, fixing his collar, running a hand through his hair. They didn't even look around. Didn't even check to see if they had been caught, because they weren't afraid. They had done this so many times. They didn't even worry about the consequences anymore. I clenched my fists at my sides, watching as they got into their separate cars and drove away, just like that. Like nothing had happened. Like they weren't destroying me in real time. That I let them go, not because I wanted to. Not because I didn't want to drag Claire out of her car and make her admit everything right then and there, but because I wasn't finished yet. That I had more work to do. That I wasn't just going to confront her. That I was going to make sure there was no way for her to manipulate her way out of this. No way to gaslight me, no way to turn the blame back on me, because I knew Claire. She was a master at twisting reality. But this time, I was going to make her face it, and when I did, she wouldn't have a single excuse left. That I drove home in complete silence. No music. No radio. Just the sound of my own breathing, heavy and uneven, as I gripped the steering wheel so tightly I thought I might snap it in half. My mind was on fire, replaying everything I had just seen, over and over again, burning it into my memory. Claire stepping out of that hotel, her body language loose and relaxed, a woman with no worries. Jason following behind her, adjusting his shirt, smug in his own confidence. They didn't even check to see if they had been caught, because why would they? I had been nothing but predictable to Claire. Reliable. Safe. The husband who never questioned too much, who trusted his wife because that's what a good husband does. She had never considered, not even for a second, that I might open my eyes and see the truth, but now I had, and I wasn't going to let her get away with it. The anger inside me had settled into something sharper. Colder. I wasn't going to explode in a blind rage. That's what she would expect. That's what she would want. Because if I lost control, she could use that against me. She could paint herself as the victim, twist the story, make it seem like I was the problem. That I wasn't going to give her that opportunity. That I was going to hit her where it hurt. That I pulled into our driveway, cutting the engine, my hands still trembling. The house looked exactly the same as when I had left, but now, it felt like a lie. Every part of it, every corner, every piece of furniture, it was all tainted. The place where we had built a life together, where I had thought we were happy, where I had believed we had a future, but it was all fake. Claire had burned it to the ground the moment she decided to be with him. I didn't go inside right away. I sat in the car, breathing deeply, forcing myself to think clearly. I needed to be smart about this. I had already gathered evidence, but it wasn't enough. I needed more. Something undeniable. Something she couldn't explain away. I unlocked my phone and started going through the emails again. I took screenshots of everything, saving them to a separate folder, backing them up in the cloud. I wasn't going to let Claire have the chance to delete anything before I confronted her. I scrolled through the messages, looking for something, anything that could tell me just how deep this went, and then I found it. A reservation, for another hotel. A different one, but the same situation. Her name. Jason's. A weekend stay, booked 2 months ago. She had planned this. She had made arrangements. She had taken time out of her life, our life, to be with him, and she hadn't even tried to hide it. The level of disrespect was staggering. I kept digging. There were flight confirmations, weekend, work trips, that hadn't actually been work trips at all. Messages where she told him how much she missed him. How she wished she could be with him all the time. How much she loved his touch, his voice, his everything. My stomach turned, but I forced myself to keep going. Because now, I wasn't just preparing for a confrontation. I was preparing for the end. I started making a list in my head. Things I needed to do before I confronted her. Things I needed to say. I wasn't going to let her manipulate me, not even for a second. I had been blind for too long, but now. Now I was awake. I stepped out of the car and walked inside, my body moving on autopilot. The house smelled like her perfume, the scent I had once loved. Now, it made me sick. Claire wasn't home yet. Of course she wasn't. She was probably still driving back from her little meeting with Jason, thinking she had gotten away with it. Thinking that she could step through the front door, kiss my cheek, and pretend that nothing had happened. I went to our bedroom and opened the closet. I stared at her clothes, her shoes, her belongings, every single piece of her life that she had shared with me. And then I looked at my own side. I wasn't staying here, not anymore. This wasn't my home. It had stopped being my home the moment she decided to share herself with someone else. I grabbed a suitcase and started packing. I didn't need much. Just enough to get me through the next few days. Enough to remind myself that I wasn't trapped here, that I had the power to leave whenever I wanted, because that's what this was about now, power. For months, Claire had been in control. She had dictated the rules, played me like a fool, made choices that affected me without my knowledge. But now, I was taking that control back. I finished packing and set the suitcase by the door. And then, I waited. Minutes passed. Then an hour. And then, finally, I heard the sound of her car pulling into the driveway. This was it. I took a deep breath, steeling myself. My heart was pounding, but I refused to let it show. I was going to face her. I was going to look her in the eyes. And I was going to end this, once and for all. The door opened. Footsteps, and then Claire walked in, smiling, like nothing had happened, like she hadn't just spent the last hour in a hotel room with another man, like she hadn't just destroyed our marriage. She looked at me and tilted her head slightly, as if she could sense something was off. She had no idea what was coming. The second Claire walked in, I felt it. The weight of everything pressing down on me, the rage sitting just beneath my skin, the betrayal thick in the air between us. But she didn't feel it. Not yet. She was still playing her role, still smiling, still acting like the devoted wife coming home after a long day. I just stood there, watching her, studying her every movement. The way she dropped her purse on the counter. The way she ran a hand through her hair, sighing like she was so exhausted from whatever fake excuse she had prepared for the night. She didn't even look at me right away. She was too busy pulling out her phone, probably checking for a message from Jason, making sure he had gotten home safely after their little rendezvous. The audacity made my stomach twist. I didn't say anything. Not yet. I wanted to see how far she would take it. How long she would keep up the lie. Finally, she glanced at me, and I saw it. That brief hesitation in her eyes, like she had sensed something was off. She wasn't stupid. She had spent months deceiving me, perfecting the act, fine-tuning her lies until they were seamless. But something in my face must have tipped her off. Still, she covered it quickly, putting on that casual, innocent expression that had fooled me for far too long. That I let her speak first. I let her say the words, let her dig herself deeper into the hole she had created. She gave me the usual excuse: late meeting, work running over, a last-minute issue that needed her attention. She said it all with such ease, such confidence, like she had done this 100 times before, because she had. That I let the silence stretch between us, watching as she grew more uncomfortable. She expected me to ask questions, to nod along, to accept whatever excuse she fed me like I always had. But I didn't. I just stood there, my arms crossed, my expression unreadable. That I could see the first crack in her facade. A slight shift in her stance, the way her fingers twitched at her side, and then I dropped the first bomb. I told her I knew. No details. No accusations. Just 2 words. 2 words that sent her entire act crumbling to the ground. She froze. For just a split second, before she caught herself. Before she forced a laugh, shaking her head, pretending like she had no idea what I was talking about. That I had expected that. I had prepared for it, so I pulled out my phone and showed her the photos, the ones of her car parked next to Jason's in the hotel lot. The ones of them walking inside together, side by side. The timestamps proving that she hadn't been at work, hadn't been in a meeting, hadn't been anywhere near where she was supposed to be. Her face went pale. She didn't even try to lie at first. She just stared at the screen, her mouth slightly open, her brain working overtime to come up with an explanation. But there was nothing. No way to twist this. No way to talk her way out of it. And then, when the silence stretched too long, she did what I knew she would do. She got angry, not guilty. Not remorseful. Not apologetic, angry. She turned it around on me, demanded to know why I had been spying on her, why I was acting crazy, why I had been following her like some paranoid husband who didn't trust his wife. She accused me of being the problem. She tried to make it seem like I was controlling, obsessive, toxic. That was when I laughed. Actually laughed because it was so pathetic. Even now, even with undeniable proof staring her in the face, she was still trying to manipulate me. Still trying to make herself the victim. So I cut her off. I told her about the emails. That shut her up real fast. Her eyes widened, and I watched as the panic finally set in. Because now, she knew. She knew I had more than just photos. I had everything. The entire history of her affair. Every love letter. Every plan they had made together. Every sickening message where she laughed about how easy it was to fool me. That was when the mask truly fell. She didn't cry. Didn't beg for forgiveness. She just stared at me, her face hard, calculating. And then, in the coldest voice I had ever heard from her, she said the words that made my blood run cold: it didn't mean anything. After everything, after months of sneaking around, of lying to my face, of humiliating me behind my back, that was her defense, like I was supposed to believe that, like she hadn't loved every second of it, like she hadn't chosen him over and over again, every time she sent a message, every time she booked a hotel, every time she kissed me goodbye before running off to be with him. That I let out a slow breath, nodding to myself. That was all I needed to hear. That it wasn't a mistake. It wasn't regret. That it was a choice, and now, it was time for me to make mine. That I walked past her, ignoring the way she called my name, the way her voice wavered like she was suddenly realizing what was happening. I grabbed my suitcase from the hallway, the one I had packed earlier, and headed for the door. She rushed after me, grabbing my arm, her grip tight and desperate. She wasn't crying. Not yet. Because she still thought she could fix this. Still thought she had some level of control. She didn't. I pulled away from her grip, opened the door, and stepped outside, and for the first time in months, I felt free. Claire had spent so much time making her choice, now I had finally made mine, and I wasn't looking back. That I walked out that door without looking back. The cold night air hit me, but I barely felt it. My pulse was still hammering in my ears, my mind still burning from everything that had just happened. Claire's voice followed me, calling my name, rising in pitch, growing more frantic the further I got. She was realizing, too late, that she had lost control. She rushed after me, her footsteps quick on the pavement. I heard her say my name again, but this time, it wasn't anger. It was desperation. That moment, that exact second, was when she knew, she finally understood that this wasn't just another fight. This wasn't just me being upset, something she could talk her way out of, something she could manipulate back into her favor. This was the end. That I reached my car and threw my bag into the passenger seat. My fingers trembled slightly as I gripped the door handle, but I refused to let it show. Claire was only a few feet away now, and when I turned to look at her, I saw it, the panic. She was breathing heavily, her eyes wide, her expression no longer cold and calculating but raw, exposed. I saw the exact moment she realized that I was actually leaving, that she had pushed too far, that the life she had so carefully balanced between two men was about to crumble in front of her. She tried to speak. Her lips parted like she was about to throw out some last-ditch effort to make me stay. Maybe another lie, maybe an apology, maybe some twisted excuse she thought might make me second-guess myself. But I didn't let her. I got in the car, slammed the door shut, and started the engine. She flinched at the sound. That I rolled down the window just slightly, enough to let her hear me over the running engine, and I said the last words I would ever say to her: "You deserve each other." Then, I drove away. I didn't check the rearview mirror. I didn't care if she was standing there watching me leave or if she had collapsed into some fake display of grief. I didn't care if she ran back inside to call Jason, to tell him everything had just blown up in her face. She had made her choice, and now, I had made mine. I didn't go far that night. I checked into a hotel, not the kind she had gone to with Jason, but a normal one where people went to escape from business trips or family vacations, not to sneak around with a coworker's wife. The room smelled clean, the bed was stiff, and everything about it felt unfamiliar. But it didn't matter. It wasn't home, but home didn't exist anymore. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at nothing, letting the weight of everything settle in. The adrenaline was wearing off now, leaving exhaustion in its place. But there was something else underneath it all. Something different, relief, because for the first time in months, I wasn't in the dark. I wasn't wondering where she was. I wasn't doubting myself, questioning my own instincts, playing the role of the clueless husband while she laughed about it behind my back. I was free. The next few days were a blur. I called a lawyer. Started the process of filing for divorce. Changed my passwords, locked down our joint accounts, did everything I could to make sure Claire wouldn't take advantage of me one last time. I didn't tell her where I was. I didn't answer her calls, her texts, her frantic attempts to reach me, but she didn't stop trying. At first, the messages were all about damage control. She said she was sorry, that she had made a mistake, that we could fix this. She didn't deny what she had done. She couldn't. But she tried to spin it into something less than what it was. She claimed it didn't mean anything. That she had been confused. That she still loved me, but the moment she realized that I wasn't falling for it, the moment she saw that I wasn't going to let her rewrite history, the anger came back. She accused me of being heartless. Said I was throwing away our marriage over one mistake. That I was overreacting. That I should have fought for her instead of running away like a coward. And the funniest part, she never once mentioned Jason, never once tried to explain his role in this, because there was no explanation. No excuse. No way to make it sound like anything other than what it was. She had betrayed me with my own coworker, a man I had trusted, a man I had spoken to every single day without knowing he was stabbing me in the back. She had built an entirely separate life behind my back, and she had enjoyed it. She didn't regret cheating. She only regretted getting caught. That I didn't go back to the house. I let her keep it. I didn't want it anymore. Too many memories. Too many ghosts of the life I thought I had. Jason tried to avoid me at work, but that didn't last long. I didn't do anything drastic. I didn't fight him, didn't scream at him in front of everyone, didn't make a scene that I didn't have to, because once the truth started spreading, once people found out what he had done, he lost everything, his reputation, his friendships, the respect of our co-workers. Claire had been right about one thing: this affair hadn't meant anything. Because the moment everything came crashing down, the moment I left and she had no more secrets to keep, Jason dropped her too. She had blown up our marriage for him, humiliated me for him, destroyed everything we had built together for him, and in the end, he didn't even want her dead. I don't know where she is now. I don't care. All I know is that I walked away with my dignity, with my self-respect, with the knowledge that I didn't let her destroy me. She had spent months making her choice, and now, I was finally living mine. That I was free, and I would never let someone like her hurt me again.